There is a grin waiting in the dark of a certain city, a wide and painted grin that never fades and never quite means what a grin is supposed to mean. And behind it, there is a figure that has frightened and fascinated the world for more than 80 years, and yet whom no one, not even his greatest enemy, has ever truly known. Tonight, slowly and softly, and in no hurry at all, we are going to wander through the whole strange history of that figure, the clown, the trickster, the laughing shadow, the one they call the Joker, and we are going to do it gently, because although his story is a dark one, it is also, in the end, only a story, only ink and paint and make-believe, and there is nothing in it that can reach you here, in the warm and quiet dark of your own room, as you drift down towards sleep. So settle in now, and let the worries of the day loosen their hold and slip quietly away, and let your body grow heavy and your breathing slow, because for the next couple of hours you have nothing at all to do but lie still and listen. If a slow, calm walk through the whole long history of this most famous of villains is the kind of thing that helps you let go and fall asleep, you might leave a gentle like before you drift away, and perhaps tell me down in the comments where in the world you are listening from tonight, and then simply release it all and let me lead you softly through the entire tangled lore of the clown, one quiet piece at a time, until the laughter fades and the dark grows kind, and sleep comes at last to carry you away. He arrived, this laughing figure, very near the beginning of it all, in the spring of 1940, in the very first issue of the Caped Detective's own comic book, and from his very first appearance, he was something new and strange and genuinely unsettling. He was not a common crook or a gangster, but a ghastly, grinning thing with chalk-white skin and green hair and a permanent, frozen smile. A murderer who announced his crimes in advance and killed his victims with a poison that left them grinning horribly in death. And readers had never seen anything quite like him, this figure who seemed to have stepped out of a nightmare and into the bright pages of an adventure comic. And here is one of the most remarkable facts in his whole long history, a small thing that changed everything, for the Joker was very nearly killed off in that very first story. The plan, as the tale was first written, was for the clown to die at the end of his debut, to be a one-time villain, a single memorable menace who would perish and never return. But someone stepped in, an editor, who looked at this striking and horrible new creation and understood that something so vivid should not be thrown away after a single use, and insisted that the clown be spared, that a final panel be added showing him alive after all. And so, by the narrowest of margins, by a single editorial decision, the greatest villain in the history of the medium was snatched back from the death that had been written for him, and allowed to live, and to return, and to haunt the Caped Detective for the rest of both their lives. It is a strange and fitting beginning for a figure so obsessed with the thin line between life and death that he should have been born already dying, already at the edge of the grave, and pulled back from it at the last instant. Had that editor not intervened, had that one final panel not been added, the whole history of the character, the decades of stories, the films and the cartoons and the countless nightmares, none of it would ever have been, and the clown would be a forgotten one-off villain from a comic almost a century old. But the panel was added, and the clown lived, and from that single spared life grew one of the most enduring and unsettling creations the human imagination has ever produced. From the very start, there was a quality to him that set him apart from every other villain, a sense that he was not merely bad but genuinely mad, not merely a criminal but a force of chaos wearing a human shape, and that quality has only deepened across the decades. He was theatrical, gleeful, utterly without the ordinary motives of greed or revenge, killing for the joke of it, for the delight of it, for reasons that made sense only inside his own painted head. And opposite him stood the grim and disciplined figure of the caped detective, everything the clown was not. And from the moment the two of them met, it was clear that they were made for each other, the perfect order and the perfect chaos, locked together in a dance that would last for the rest of time. There is a fitting mystery at the very root of the clown, for even the question of who created him has never been fully and finally settled, and it has been quietly argued over for the better part of a century. 3 men were there at the beginning, in that small studio where the early adventures of the Cape Detective were made, and each of them, across the years, remembered the birth of the clown differently, and each of them, in his own telling, played the crucial part. There was the artist whose name went on the comics, and the quiet writer who did so much of the uncredited work, and a young assistant, barely out of his teens, who claimed that the whole idea had been his, and they never agreed, not fully, not ever, so that the origin of the character behind the scenes is as uncertain and as disputed as the origin of the character within the stories, a riddle with no clean answer, which is, somehow, exactly right for him. The pieces they each remembered are wonderful, and they fit together into the strange shape we know. One of them, so the story goes, brought in a playing card, the Joker from an ordinary deck, that grinning figure in motley who is the wild card, the card that can be anything, and suggested that it might make a fine basis for a villain. And someone thought of an old silent film from the 1920s, a haunting picture in which an actor played a man whose face had been carved, in his childhood, into a permanent, ghastly grin, so that he smiled always, horribly, whether he wished to or not, a frozen rictus that could never be undone. That single unforgettable image, the man with the carved and permanent smile, seems to have poured directly into the design of the clown, giving him that terrible fixed grin. And between the playing card and the grinning actor, the look of the character took shape. There is something perfect in those two sources, the Joker card and the man who could not stop smiling, for together they capture the two halves of what he would become. The playing card gives him his nature as the wild card, the agent of pure chance and chaos, the one who does not follow the rules of the game, because he is not really a card in the game at all, but something outside it, unpredictable, ungovernable. And the grinning actor gives him his horror, the sense of a smile that is not really a smile, of joy turned into something frozen and wrong, of a face locked into an expression that no longer means what it should, chaos and a false, frozen mirth, wild chance and a grin that hides a horror. And out of those two old images, a playing card and a silent film, the greatest villain in the medium was born. Whoever truly first imagined him, and it may have been all 3 of them together, each adding a piece, the clown that emerged was more than the sum of those parts, more than a card and a grin, for he had a spirit, a presence, a genuine and unsettling life that leapt off the page from his very first appearance. And in a way it is fitting that no single person can claim him cleanly, that his creation is a tangle of competing memories and disputed credit. For the clown himself is a creature of tangles and contradictions, a figure who resists any single clean account of himself, whether of how he was made in the world of the studio or of how he came to be in the world of the story. He was born in uncertainty, and he has lived in it ever since, and he would, one suspects, be delighted to know that even his own creators could never quite agree on where he came from. Within the stories themselves, the question of where the clown came from is even more deliberately clouded, and this is one of the most important things to understand about him. for unlike almost every other villain, he has no fixed and certain origin at all. Over the long decades, a story has been told, more than once and in more than one form, of how an ordinary man might have become the clown. And the most famous version of it is a genuinely sad one. In that telling he was, before the paint and the grin, a nobody, a failed comedian, a gentle and struggling man who could not make anyone laugh, scraping by at the very bottom of the city, with a young wife he loved and a child on the way, and no money at all to care for them. In his desperation, so the story goes, he agreed to help two criminals with a robbery, to guide them through a chemical plant where he had once worked, in exchange for enough money to give his family a fresh start. And the gang made him wear a disguise, a red hood and cloak that hid his face, so that he would be blamed if things went wrong. And things went very wrong. On the very eve of the robbery came the terrible news that his young wife and their unborn child had died, suddenly, in an accident, and the man was destroyed, hollowed out with grief. But the criminals would not release him from the deal, and forced him to go through with it anyway. And in the chaos of the botched robbery, confronted by the sudden terrifying shape of the caped detective, the grieving man in the red hood panicked, and fell, and plunged into a vat of chemical waste, and was swept away. He did not drown. He dragged himself from the poisoned water alive, and pulled the hood from his head, and saw in his reflection what the chemicals had done. His skin bleached bone white, his hair turned green, his lips stained red, his face transformed into a ghastly clown's mask that would never wash away. And whether it was the chemicals, or the grief, or the horror of his own reflection, or all of them together, something in his mind gave way in that moment. And where the gentle, frightened man had been, there was now only a rising, terrible laughter, and the clown was born out of a single unbearable day that took everything from him at once. But here is the crucial thing. The thing that makes him so much stranger and more frightening than any ordinary tragic villain. For the clown himself does not insist that this story is true. He tells it, sometimes, but he also says, in one famous and chilling moment, that he can never quite remember his own past, that the details shift and change in his memory, and that if he is going to have a history, he would prefer it to be multiple choice. He is not sure who he was, or whether the failed comedian ever existed, or whether he fell into the chemicals at all, and neither, in the end, is anyone else. For the caped detective, the world's greatest detective, who has solved every other mystery he ever faced, has never once been able to discover the clown's real name, or his true history, or the face that lay beneath the paint before that day, if there ever was such a day. Think for a moment about how deeply unsettling that really is. An enemy with no certain past, no name you can learn, no true face you can find, a laughing blank where a person ought to be. Every other villain, however terrible, has a history you can trace, a wound you can pity, a reason you can at least understand. But the clown offers none of it. Only a shifting fog of contradictory possibilities, a past that will not hold still, a self that cannot be pinned down. He might have been a failed comedian, or a petty criminal, or something else entirely, or nothing at all. He might have fallen into the chemicals, or he might not, and the uncertainty is not a gap in the story, but the very heart of it. For the clown is, in the deepest sense, unknowable, a mystery that even the greatest detective in the world cannot solve. And that unknowability is part of what makes him so much more than a villain. For a monster you can understand is a monster you can, in some way, contain, but a monster with no fixed origin, no name, no comprehensible reason, is something closer to a force of nature, or a nightmare, or an idea. He is chaos itself given a human shape and a painted grin. And chaos has no origin story, no tidy explanation, no reason that can be reasoned with. The failed comedian and the chemical vat may be true, or they may be just one more of his jokes, a sad and plausible tale he tells to those who need him to have a past. And the truth, if there is a truth, is lost forever, drowned in that vat of chemicals along with whoever the man used to be, leaving only the laughter echoing down the years. Whatever the truth of his origin, the clown took from it, or claims to have taken from it, a single terrible idea, a philosophy that he has spent the whole of his existence trying to prove, and it is worth understanding, gently, for it sits at the very center of who he is. His belief is this, that the only thing separating a sane and decent person from a raving lunatic like himself is one sufficiently bad day. He had a bad day, he says, one unbearable stretch of hours that took everything from him and broke his mind, and he insists that anyone at all, even the best and kindest and most stable soul, could be pushed over the very same edge if only they were pushed hard enough, given the right catastrophe at the right moment. It is a genuinely disturbing idea, and part of what makes it disturbing is that it is not obviously false. We all know, somewhere deep down, that we are more fragile than we like to pretend, that we depend on a great many things going more or less right, that the right loss or the right betrayal or the right unbearable afternoon could shake anyone to their foundations, and the clown seizes on that quiet fear and makes it his gospel, insisting that our sanity, our goodness, our very selves are far more fragile than we wish to believe, that the whole edifice of a decent life is balanced on a knife's edge and could be toppled by a single hard enough push. He is, in his way, a philosopher of despair, and his entire criminal career is really a long and cruel argument in favor of his bleak thesis. For that is what his crimes are really about, when you look closely, not money, not power, not revenge in any ordinary sense, but the proving of that terrible point. He does not rob banks to be rich or kill to be feared. He does it to demonstrate over and over that the world is a joke, that order is an illusion, that goodness is fragile, and sanity is a thin veneer over a howling chaos, and that he, who has seen through all of it, who has been broken and freed by his own bad day, is the only one who truly understands. He wants company in his madness, in a sense, wants to prove that everyone is secretly as broken as he is, or could be, and every terrible thing he does is a kind of demonstration, a lesson, an attempt to make the world admit the truth he believes he alone can see. And this is why he is so fixated on the caped detective, above all others, for the detective is the great living argument against the clown's philosophy. Here is a man who had the worst bad day imaginable, who as a child watched his parents murdered before his eyes, who suffered exactly the kind of unbearable catastrophe the clown insists will break anyone, and who did not break, or rather who broke in a different direction, who took his bad day and turned it not into madness and cruelty, but into a lifelong commitment to protecting others. The detective is the proof that the clown is wrong, that one bad day does not have to make a monster, that a person can suffer the worst and still choose to be good, and the clown cannot bear it, cannot let it stand, and so he returns again and again to try to break the one man who refuses to be broken. There is a terrible logic to their whole war, once you see it this way, for it is not really a war about crime at all, but a war about an idea, a lifelong argument between two men who each had the worst day of their lives and came out of it in opposite directions. The clown says that everyone is one bad day away from becoming him, and the detective, simply by existing, by remaining good, by refusing to cross the line into cruelty no matter what is done to him, says that this is not true, that goodness is a choice that can be held on to even in the depths of the worst suffering. And so the clown keeps trying to prove his point, and the detective keeps refusing to let him, and the argument goes on, endlessly, neither one able to convince the other, because it is, in the end, an argument about the deepest question there is, whether people are fundamentally good or fundamentally fragile, whether the darkness or the light has the final word. It is a heavy idea to sit with, the clown's philosophy of the one bad day, and yet there is a comfort to be found in the answer the detective gives to it, the quiet, stubborn, living proof that suffering does not have to make us cruel, that we can be hurt, badly, terribly, and still choose kindness, still choose to protect rather than to wound. The clown may be right that we are fragile, that a bad day can shake anyone, but he is wrong about what that fragility means. For the detective shows that even a broken person can choose which way to turn their pain, outward into cruelty or outward into care, and that choice, made freely even in the depths of grief, is the thing the clown can never understand and never defeat. The bond between the clown and the caped detective is the deepest and strangest relationship in either of their lives, and it is worth dwelling on gently, for it is far more than the ordinary enmity of a hero and a villain. They are opposites in every way that matters, so perfectly matched in their opposition that each seems almost to have been made to complete the other. The detective is grim, disciplined, controlled, devoted to order and to a single unbreakable rule. The clown is gleeful, wild, chaotic, bound by nothing at all. The detective works in silence and shadow. The clown works in laughter and gaudy color. The detective is all restraint. The clown is all excess. They are the two halves of some terrible whole, order and chaos, and they are drawn to each other and defined by each other in a way that neither can escape. For the clown, the detective is the only thing that gives his chaos meaning, the one fixed point against which he defines himself, the great order he exists to disrupt, and in some deep and troubling way, the clown seems to need the detective, to come alive only when the detective is there to oppose him. There are stories that suggest the clown falls into a kind of grey emptiness when the detective is absent, a listlessness, a fading, and only rouses himself to full and terrible life when his great enemy returns to the city, as though the detective were the audience his whole performance is aimed at, the one witness whose attention makes the joke worth telling. He is obsessed with the detective, fixated on him, in a way that goes far beyond hatred, closer to a dark and terrible love, the fascination of chaos with the order it can never quite topple. And the detective, for his part, is bound to the clown by the terrible weight of his own great rule, the rule that he will never take a life, not even this one. For the clown has done monstrous things, has killed and killed again, has hurt the people the detective loves most, and the whole world would forgive the detective, would perhaps even thank him if he were to end the clown once and for all. And the detective wants to, in his darkest moments. The temptation is real and constant and almost unbearable, but he will not, because he understands that the day he crosses that line, even for the best reason imaginable, even to stop this one monster, he will have lost the thing that separates him from the darkness, and the grieving child he once was will be gone for good, and he will have become, in the end, just another kind of killer. And so the detective holds the line, even here, even against the clown, and this creates one of the most disturbing and profound aspects of their whole relationship. for it means that the detective is, in a terrible sense, the clown's protector. Every time the clown is caught, the detective spares him and delivers him to be locked away, and every time the clown escapes and kills again, and the detective catches him once more and spares him once more, and the cycle turns endlessly, the detective's mercy guaranteeing that the killing will continue. The clown knows this and treasures it and taunts the detective with it, delighting in the knowledge that he has made his greatest enemy complicit in his crimes, has trapped the noblest man in the city into keeping the worst monster alive. It is a genuine moral knot, and the stories have wrestled with it for decades. This question of whether the detective's refusal to kill the clown is a great and admirable principle or a kind of terrible failing, whether it is heroism or a moral vanity that allows a murderer to keep murdering. There is no easy answer, and the finest stories do not pretend there is one, but let it stand simply, for the sake of the night, that the detective holds his rule because to abandon it would be to abandon himself, and that the clown lives because the detective refuses to become like the clown in order to stop him. It is a hard and unresolved thing, and it sits at the center of their endless dance. What is certain is that the two of them are locked together for as long as their stories are told, unable to defeat each other, unwilling to become each other, circling forever in the dark. The clown cannot break the detective, and the detective cannot bring himself to end the clown, and so they go on, the order and the chaos, the silence and the laughter, each the great fact of the other's life, each incomplete without the other, bound by a connection deeper and stranger than any friendship or any hatred. It is one of the great relationships in all of fiction, precisely because it is so impossible to name. Two men who complete each other, who need each other, who are each the other's greatest enemy and, in some terrible way, the only one who truly understands them. The crimes of the clown, across the long decades, are the stuff of nightmares, and I will speak of them gently, for they are dark, and there is no need to carry the sharp edges of them down into your sleep. His signature weapon, from the very beginning, is a poison of his own devising, a toxin that pulls its victims' faces into a wide and delighted grin even as it kills them, so that they die laughing, their frozen smiles a horrible parody of joy. There is something uniquely awful in that idea, a killer who makes death itself look like a punchline, who turns the human face, the very seat of our feeling, into the site of his terrible joke. And it is perhaps the purest expression of what he is, the turning of joy into horror, of laughter into death. What makes his crimes so much more frightening than ordinary cruelty is the absence of any ordinary motive behind them. He does not kill out of greed, for he cares nothing for money. He does not kill out of hatred, for he feels no particular malice toward most of his victims. He does not even, in the usual sense, take pleasure in suffering, not the way a sadist does. He kills the way a bored and cruel child might pull the wings from a fly, out of a vast and empty amusement, out of a chaos so complete that the lives of others simply do not register as real to him, and that emptiness, that bottomless lack of any comprehensible reason, is somehow far more chilling than any ordinary malice could ever be. There is nothing to bargain with, nothing to appeal to, no reason that can be reasoned against, only the laughter and the void behind it. And yet, for all the horror of his crimes, the stories are careful, in their better moments, not to let us simply enjoy him as a spectacle of evil, for the clown's victims are real people, within the world of the story, and their deaths carry weight, and the detective carries the grief of every one of them. It would be easy to let the clown become merely entertaining, a delightful monster whose crimes are a kind of dark fun, but the finest tellings never quite allow it, always reminding us, beneath the theatricality and the wit, that what he does causes genuine suffering, that behind every one of his jokes is a real loss, and that the laughter is not really funny at all but the sound of something deeply and terribly broken. There is a particular horror in the way he treats the whole world as his stage and every person in it as a prop for his performance. For the clown does not see other people as people at all, but as parts in the great joke he is forever telling, extras to be used and discarded as the punchline requires. He is a performer without an audience's mercy, an artist whose medium is cruelty, and he arranges his crimes like set pieces, elaborate and theatrical, and designed above all to make a point, to shock, to horrify, to prove once again his bleak thesis about the fragility of the world. And there is a loneliness in that too, buried far beneath the horror, the loneliness of a being who cannot connect with another living soul except through cruelty, who has reduced all of human life to a joke that only he finds funny. But we will not linger in the darkness of his crimes, for it is late, and the night is meant for rest, and there is a limit to how long we need to dwell on the worst of him. It is enough to understand that he is genuinely frightening, genuinely monstrous, not a lovable rogue but a true horror, and that the stories, at their best, never forget it. And it is enough, too, to remember, as we move on toward gentler ground, that all of it is only a story, that the poison and the grinning victims and the theatrical cruelty are only ink and imagination, shadows on a page, and that they have no power at all here, in the warm and quiet dark, where you are safe and held and drifting slowly down toward sleep. Among all the terrible things the clown has done, there are two in particular that stand out, that cut deepest into the detective's life, and they are worth telling gently because they shaped everything that came after, and because the story of how they came to be reaches out of the fiction and into the real world in a strange and haunting way. The first is the murder of a child, the young partner who fought at the detective's side in bright colors. The second of the boys to wear that role, a rougher and angrier child than the first, whom the detective had taken in and sworn to protect. The way that story came to be told is genuinely macabre, for at the time the writers found themselves unsure whether readers even liked the boy, and so they made a most unusual decision. They set up a telephone vote, printing 2 numbers in the comic, and invited the readers to call in and decide whether the boy would live or die, putting the fate of a fictional child into the hands of the audience. And the vote was close, closer than almost anyone expected, but in the end, by a slim and haunting margin, the callers chose death. And so the boy was killed, and it was the clown who did it, luring the child into a trap and beating him and leaving him in a building set to be destroyed, so that the detective arrived only moments too late to save the boy he loved. I will not dwell on the cruelty of it, for it is a hard and painful thing, but I will say what it meant, for it was one of the great turning points in the whole long saga. The death of that boy became one of the deepest griefs of the detective's life, a wound that never fully healed, and he kept the boy's empty costume preserved in a glass case in the depths of his cave, a memorial he passed every night, a permanent reminder of the one he could not save. And it deepened more than ever the terrible weight of the detective's refusal to kill, for now the clown had murdered his own child, and still the detective would not cross the line, would not take even this life, and the restraint that had always been hard became now almost unbearable. There is something worth sitting with, quietly, in that strange fact of the phone vote, in the knowledge that somewhere out in the real world, thousands of ordinary people, picked up their telephones and voted on the life of a fictional child, and that the story was shaped by their choice. It says something about the strange relationship between a story and the people who love it, about the way a fictional death can carry real weight, real grief, and about how the clown, even in the way his greatest cruelty was written, became a figure entangled with the real world in ways that other villains never quite were. The boy who died would, in time, return, as characters in these stories so often do, but the grief of his death and the darkness of how it was decided left a mark that never entirely faded. For the detective, the murder of that child became the clown's greatest crime, the thing he could least forgive and least undo, and it hangs over their whole relationship ever after, the unbearable question of why the detective still, even after this, will not end the one who did it. It is the ultimate test of the detective's rule, and the clown knows it and holds it over him, this proof that he murdered the detective's son and was allowed to live. And there is no darker or more difficult thread in the whole of their long and terrible dance. But we will leave the grief of it now and let it settle into stillness and move gently on, for there is another of the clown's great cruelties still to tell, and then, at last, the darkness of his story will begin to lift. The other of the clown's great cruelties is the one in which he set out, most deliberately of all, to prove his terrible philosophy, to demonstrate that anyone at all could be driven mad by a single bad day, and it is one of the most famous of all his stories, and I will tell it gently, and pass over its worst moments lightly, for beneath its darkness it carries, in the end, a quiet and stubborn hope. The clown chose, as the subject of his experiment, one of the most decent and steady men in all the city, the honest old police commissioner, the detective's oldest ally on the right side of the law, a good and gentle man who had held on to his principles through decades in a corrupt and violent place. If anyone could be broken, the clown reasoned, if even a man as sturdy and as good as this could be driven mad by a single day of horror, then his dark thesis would be proven. And so the clown gave the good commissioner his one bad day, and it was a cruel and terrible thing. And here I will pass over the worst of it, for you do not need its details in the dark. It is enough to say that the clown struck at the commissioner through the person he loved most, his daughter, a brave young woman, hurting her terribly, a wound that would change her life forever. And then he took the grieving father away to a nightmarish abandoned carnival, and there he tried, with every cruelty he could devise, to break the good man's mind, to drive him mad, to prove that one bad day was all it took. But the commissioner did not break. Through all of it, through the worst night of his life, through horror and grief and torment, the honest old man held on to himself, held on to his sanity and his principles, and when it was over, battered and broken-hearted but unbowed, he asked only one thing, that the detective bring the clown in properly, lawfully, by the book, unharmed, to show that the clown's way was wrong, that even now, even after everything, the good way was still worth holding to. Even shattered by grief, the good man would not become what the clown wanted him to become, and in that refusal the clown's whole terrible thesis was answered. For here was a man given the worst of all bad days, who did not, would not, break. There is a strange and haunting final moment to that story, in which the detective, having found the clown at last, stands with him in the rain, and the clown, of all things, tells a joke, a small sad joke about two men trying to escape from an asylum, and the detective, of all things, laughs, just for a moment, the two enemies standing together in the dark and laughing at the end of a terrible night. What that moment means, no one has ever quite agreed, whether it is a flicker of shared humanity, a moment of terrible understanding, or something darker still, and the story leaves it deliberately unresolved, hanging there in the rain, one of the most discussed and mysterious endings in all of the medium. It is a moment that has haunted readers for decades, that refuses to give up its meaning, and perhaps that is exactly right, for it is a moment about the thin and terrible line between the two of them, and such a line can never be entirely explained. And the truest hope in the whole dark story is not in that ambiguous rain-soaked moment, but in what became, afterward, of the young woman the clown had hurt so terribly. For the clown had meant her only as a tool, a means to torment her father, had not thought of her as a person at all, and had believed that in hurting her, he had ended her story. But he was wrong as he was about everything, for she refused to let the worst thing that had ever happened to her be the end of her, and she remade herself, turning her brilliant mind to a new kind of heroism, becoming the unseen guide and the master of information at the very heart of a whole community of heroes, more powerful and more important in the end than she had ever been before. The clown had tried to prove that one bad day could destroy anyone, and instead she proved the opposite, that some people, given the worst day imaginable, will not break, but will find a way to endure and even to rise. No account of the clown would be complete without the one person who has come closest to him, who has loved him and followed him and suffered for him, and her story is one of the most fascinating in the whole of his lore, not least because of where it began. For she was not born in the comics at all, but on television, dreamed up for an animated series in the early 1990s, created almost as an afterthought, a giggling henchwoman to stand at the clown's side for a single episode. But there was something about her, some spark, some life, that leapt off the screen, and she proved so instantly and completely beloved that she escaped the cartoon that made her, and leapt into the comics, and then into the wider world, becoming one of the most popular characters the whole mythology has ever produced, a rare case of a creation outgrowing the story that first contained her. Her name is Harley Quinn, and her real story, beneath the bright colours and the giggling, is a dark one, and it is important to tell it truly, for she was once a bright and capable young woman, a psychiatrist named Harleen, ambitious and clever, who took a position at the asylum where the clown was held, believing that she could understand him, perhaps even help him, perhaps even write the book that would make her famous. And she was assigned to treat him, to sit with him across a table, session after session, and to try to reach the mind behind the grin. But it was the clown who reached her, for across those sessions he worked upon her the way a skilled and patient manipulator works upon anyone, finding her loneliness and her ambition and her need, telling her the story she wanted to hear, until the doctor became the patient and the healer became the prey. By the end of that slow seduction, she had abandoned everything, her career, her name, her sanity, and remade herself into his devoted follower, painting her face and taking a new name and giving herself over completely to him and to his chaos, utterly convinced that what she felt was love and that he loved her in return. But the relationship the stories go on to depict is nothing like love, and this is the crucial and sobering heart of her tale, for it is really a long portrait of an abusive relationship, dressed up in bright colors and a giggling laugh. He belittles her and endangers her and casts her aside and hurts her, and then draws her back with a few kind words and abandons her to take the blame for his crimes, again and again, while she forgives him every time and returns for more, always believing that this time will be different, that he truly cares, that the cruelty is somehow her own fault. It is one of the most accurate and quietly harrowing depictions of an abusive relationship in all of popular fiction, and it is all the more disturbing for how long many readers took it as a kind of romance, for how easily real cruelty can hide behind a painted smile and a joke and the language of love, and it reveals, perhaps better than anything else, the true nature of the clown. For here we see exactly what he does to a person who gets close to him, the way he takes a good and capable soul and slowly, deliberately, takes her apart and rebuilds her into something that serves him, the way his chaos consumes everyone it touches. She is, in a sense, his greatest crime, not because he killed her, but because he did something in a way worse. He unmade her and made her love him for it. But her story, unlike so many in the clown's dark orbit, does not end there, and this is what makes her, in the end, more hopeful than tragic. For across the years that followed, the long and difficult arc of her later stories became the tale of a woman slowly recognizing the abuse for what it was, and clawing her way free of it, reclaiming her own name and her own life and her own mind, learning at last to stand on her own, and even, in time, finding a genuine and gentle love elsewhere, with another of the city's wounded souls, a love built not on manipulation and cruelty, but on real tenderness and real care. Her escape from the clown became one of the most beloved and celebrated arcs in all of modern comics, precisely because it is a story of survival, of a person breaking free of someone who had taken everything from her and finding her way back to herself. There is a real and important truth in her story, beneath all the color and the chaos, about how the most dangerous monsters do not always come at you with a weapon, that some of them come with a smile and a soft voice and a promise, and take you apart so slowly and so gently that you thank them for it. And there is a real and important hope in it too, in the fact that she got out, that she found her way free, that even a person broken and rebuilt by someone else's cruelty can, with time, reclaim themselves and find their way back to the light. She is the clown's victim and his creation, and in the end his one great failure, the one he could not keep, the one who got away. And there is a quiet triumph in that which is a good thing to carry gently towards sleep. The clown we have been describing, the murderous and terrifying figure, has not always been the clown on the page. And one of the fascinating things about his long history is how completely he has changed shape with the times, becoming, across the decades, several quite different characters who happen to share a name and a grin. In his earliest years, in the beginning, he was very much the frightening figure of his first appearance, a genuine murderer, a killer who left grinning corpses in his wake, dark and deadly and unsettling. But as the years passed and his audience grew younger, and the whole medium came under pressure to be wholesome and harmless, the clown was softened, tamed, defanged, transformed from a murderer into something far gentler. For a long stretch in the middle of the last century, the clown became a mere prankster, a harmless clown-themed criminal who pulled elaborate but bloodless capers, robbing with joy buzzers and trick flowers, a figure of fun rather than fear, about as far from a killer as it is possible to imagine. And this gentler, sillier clown found his most famous expression on a beloved television show of the 1960s, where he was played gloriously as a cackling, harmless buffoon, all bright color and broad comedy. And there is a lovely small piece of history from that show, for the actor who played him refused to shave off his own moustache for the role, and so the makeup artists simply painted the clown's white grease paint straight over it, meaning that if you look closely at that grinning television villain, you can still see the faint outline of the actor's real moustache showing through beneath the paint. But the murderous clown of the beginning was not gone, only sleeping, and in the early 1970s, the storytellers made a deliberate choice to bring him back, to strip away the harmless silliness and restore the clown to what he had been at the start, a genuine and frightening killer, a homicidal maniac rather than a giggling prankster. It was a conscious reclaiming of his original darkness, and it set the course for everything that followed. For from that point on, the clown grew steadily darker and more disturbing, decade by decade, as the whole medium was allowed to grow more serious and more adult, until he became the figure of genuine horror that we know today, one of the most frightening villains in all of fiction. The modern decades have taken him to places darker than even his earliest creators could have imagined, into genuine body horror and genuine nightmare. There is a story, one of the most grotesque he ever appeared in which he allows a disturbed surgeon to cut the very skin from his face, and then, sometime later, returns wearing that loose, dead face strapped over his own like a mask, so that he can go on grinning even as his true face rots away somewhere else. It is horror of the purest and most unsettling kind, and it was meant to be. A statement that the clown has moved beyond even the human need for a face, and it disturbed a great many readers precisely because it worked, because it took something everyone thought they knew and made it monstrous in a way that lingers. There have been stories, too, that reach toward the idea that the clown may be something more than a man, that he may in some sense be unkillable, immortal, a figure who has haunted the city for far longer than any ordinary lifespan would allow, who has died many times and always returned, who may be less a person than a kind of recurring nightmare the city cannot wake from. These darker and stranger modern tellings have pushed him from a human villain towards something closer to a force, a principle, an eternal and inescapable chaos. And while the stories never quite settle whether he is truly immortal or merely seems so, the very suggestion deepens the dread of him, the sense that he can never really be defeated, never really be ended, because he is not really the kind of thing that can die. Through all these changes, from the killer of the beginning to the harmless prankster of the middle years to the horror of the modern age, the essential mystery of him has only deepened, and it is remarkable, when you step back, that a single character could contain so many different versions and remain, somehow, recognizably himself. He can be a figure of pure comedy in one telling and a figure of pure horror in the next, can be silly and terrifying, harmless and monstrous, and beneath all of it there is still the same grinning uncertainty, the same wild chaos, the same unknowable void behind the painted smile. That range, that ability to be so many things at once, is part of what has kept him alive and fascinating for so long, for there is always another version of him to discover, another face behind the face, another joke you have not yet heard. The clown has lived not only on the page but on the screen, and across the years he has been brought to life by a series of remarkable performers, each of whom found something different in him, and together they form a kind of gallery of the character. No single one of them, the whole truth, but each capturing some real part of him. There was the cackling television buffoon we have already met, all harmless comedy, and then, at the end of the 1980s, in the first great serious film of the caped detective, the clown was played by a celebrated actor as a gleeful and theatrical gangster, vain and murderous and darkly funny, given, in that film, a version of the old chemical vat origin, a criminal transformed into the grinning monster. It was a performance that delighted audiences and helped prove that these characters could carry serious, big-budget cinema, and for a time it was the definitive screen version of the clown. But it was another performance, 2 decades later that would eclipse even that one and become, for many people, the greatest portrayal of any comic book character ever put on film. In a celebrated later film, a young actor threw himself so completely into the role, disappeared so utterly into the clown's grinning chaos, that he seemed to become something genuinely frightening and genuinely new, a clown with no fixed origin at all, who told different and contradictory stories about his own scars, embodying on screen the very idea of the multiple-choice past that the comics had long explored. His clown was not a theatrical gangster, but a force of pure anarchy, a philosopher of chaos, terrifying and mesmerizing in equal measure, and his performance has hung over every version since, admired and studied and never quite equaled. And there is a deep and lasting sorrow woven through that celebrated performance, for the young actor who gave it, who poured so much of himself into the role, died at just 28, before the film was even released, from an accidental overdose of prescription medication. He was awarded, after his death, the highest honor his industry could give, a rare thing for this kind of film, and his portrayal has been mourned as much as it has been admired ever since. A brilliant young man who gave everything to bring the clown to life, and did not live to see the world fall in love with what he had done. It is one of the quieter tragedies attached to the whole legend, and it lends the character, on screen, a shadow of real loss, real grief, beneath all the painted laughter. Other performers have taken up the role since, in different films and different styles, one giving the clown a tattooed and gangster-like modern menace, another building a whole film around a single troubled man's slow and sorrowful descent into becoming the clown, a quiet and melancholy character study that reimagined him not as a force of chaos, but as a broken and neglected soul ground down by an uncaring world until nothing was left but the laughter. Each of these versions found something real in the character, some facet of his endless possibility, and the very fact that he can support so many different interpretations, comic and tragic, theatrical and grounded, monstrous and pitiable, is a testament to how deep and how flexible a creation he is. But for a great many people, the truest clown of all was never on the movie screen at all, but in animation, in a voice, for when that beloved animated series of the 1990s brought the character to life, the clown was voiced by a performer already famous as a heroic figure from a galaxy far away, who reinvented himself completely as the clown, giving him a wild, cackling, endlessly inventive laugh that became, for a whole generation, the very sound of the character in their heads. He went on to voice the clown for the better part of 30 years, across show after show and game after game, and his laugh, that particular manic, delighted, terrible laugh, is for countless people the definitive clown, the one against which all the others are measured, proof that sometimes the truest version of a character is not a face at all, but a voice, heard in the dark. There is something fitting in the fact that the clown has been played by so many, and belongs to no single one of them, for he is, after all, a character without a fixed face or a fixed past, a wild card who can be anything, and so it is only right that he should be, on the screen, many different people, each lending him their own performance for a while, none of them the final word. He is larger than any one actor, any one film, any one voice, a figure who has passed, like all the great myths, into the shared imagination of the whole world, endlessly reinterpreted, endlessly reborn, always recognizably himself, and yet never quite the same twice, the grin behind 1,000 different faces. One of the strangest things about the clown, across his long history, is how many times he has died, and how he never, ever stays dead. He has been shot and drowned and blown up and fallen from great heights, has seemed to perish in a dozen different ways across the decades, and each time, somehow, he returns, walking back out of the grave with the same grin and the same laugh, as though death itself were just one more of his jokes. And there is a genuine unease in that pattern, in an enemy who cannot be permanently stopped, who keeps coming back no matter what, so that even in the rare moments when he seems finally to be gone, no one, least of all the detective, quite believes it. This deathlessness has become, over the years, almost a part of his character, a quality that separates him from ordinary villains, and the stories have played with it in unsettling ways. Some have suggested, as we touched on earlier, that he may be genuinely more than human, sustained by forces that keep bringing him back, a recurring nightmare rather than a mortal man. Others leave it as a kind of dark comedy, the clown simply refusing to die because it would not be funny for him to die, cheating death the way he cheats everything else, through sheer perverse will and the logic of the joke. But whether it is explained or left a mystery, the effect is the same, the sense of a figure who cannot be ended, who will always return, who is, in some deep way, permanent. And there is a terrible symmetry in that, for it mirrors the deathlessness of the detective himself and of all these great characters who can never truly be allowed to end because their stories must go on being told. The clown returns for the same reason the hero returns, because the story is not finished, because there are more tales to tell, because a character this beloved and this important can never be permanently retired. And so the two of them are bound together not only in life, but in their shared inability to die, condemned to return again and again, to face each other one more time, and one more time after that, across all the years, neither ever able to truly end the other, neither ever able to truly end at all. It gives their whole endless war a quality that is at once exhausting and strangely comforting, this knowledge that it will never really be over, that the clown will always come back and the detective will always be there to stop him, that the dance will go on forever. For the clown, one imagines, this is a kind of joy, the eternal recurrence of the game he loves, the promise that he will always have his great enemy to torment and his chaos to spread. For the detective, it is closer to a sentence, the knowledge that his war can never truly be won, that the clown he cannot bring himself to kill will always return to kill again. But for both of them, it is simply the shape of their existence, the eternal return, the wheel that turns and never stops. There is something almost mythic in it, in the end, in the figure who cannot die, the eternal trickster who returns in every age to trouble the order of the world, for he begins to seem less like a single villain and more like a permanent feature of his fictional universe, a force as constant as the hero himself, the chaos that will always rise to meet the order, the shadow that the light will always cast. He has been dying and returning for the better part of a century now, and he shows no sign at all of stopping, and there is a strange comfort even in that, in the reliability of it, the certainty that whatever happens, the eternal dance will go on, the clown will laugh again, and the hero will be there, again, to answer him. Between his crimes and his returns, the clown spends a great deal of his existence in a single place, a crumbling old asylum on the edge of the city, a Gothic institution where the criminally insane of the city are sent, and from which he endlessly, inevitably escapes. It is his home, in a sense, the place he returns to again and again, and there is a whole dark lore around it, a cursed and haunted institution as troubled as any of its inmates, a revolving door through which the clown passes on his way back into the world. He is its most infamous resident, and there is something fitting in the image of him there, in a cell, waiting, biding his time, always certain that he will find his way out again, as he always does. But the asylum raises a question that hangs over the whole of the clown's story, and it is a genuinely interesting and unsettling one. The question of whether he is truly mad at all. He is kept in an institution for the insane, and he is certainly not sane in any ordinary sense, and yet there is a cunning to him, a control, a deliberateness that does not sit easily with the idea of genuine madness. His schemes are elaborate and carefully planned. His manipulations, as we saw with the young psychiatrist, are patient and precise. He seems, often, to be entirely in command of himself, playing at madness as much as suffering from it. And so the question arises, is the clown a genuinely insane man who cannot help what he does? Or is he something colder and more terrible, a sane man who has chosen chaos, who uses the appearance of madness as a mask and a shield and an excuse? The stories have never settled this, and deliberately so, for the uncertainty is part of his horror. If he is truly mad, then there is a kind of pity owed him, a sense that he is as much a victim of his broken mind as anyone he has hurt, that he cannot help being what he is. But if he is sane, if he has chosen all of it with a clear mind, then he is something far worse, a person who looked at the world and decided, coldly and freely, to spread cruelty and chaos for the sheer delight of it, fully responsible for every terrible thing he has done. And the clown himself will not answer the question, will not say which he is, seems to enjoy the ambiguity, hiding always behind the grin, so that we can never be sure whether we are looking at a broken man to be pitied or a monster to be condemned. There is a mirror here, too, to the detective, and to the whole strange world they share, for the asylum is really a catalogue of all the different ways a mind can come apart, and the clown is its most extreme example. And yet the detective himself, the man who dresses as a bat and relives his childhood trauma every night and cannot let his grief go, is not entirely a stranger to that catalogue either. There are stories that dare to suggest that the line between the detective and the inmates of the asylum is thinner than anyone wants to admit, that the clown is right when he taunts the detective with the idea that they are not so different, both shaped by trauma, both living outside the ordinary world, both a little mad. And the clown delights in this, in blurring the line, in insisting that he and the detective are two of a kind, two broken men in costumes, and the detective's refusal to accept this, his insistence that there is a difference, that the choice to protect is not the same as the choice to destroy, is part of what their whole war is about. We will not solve the riddle of the clown's madness tonight, for it cannot be solved, and that is the point, but there is no need to, for it is only a story, and the question, fascinating as it is, need not trouble your rest. Let it hang there, unanswered, in the fog around the old asylum, the eternal question of whether the grin hides a broken mind or a cold and chosen cruelty. And let us move gently on, for the darkness of his story is nearly behind us now, and there is gentler and more thoughtful ground ahead, where we can look at what the clown means, and why, after all this, the world remains so endlessly fascinated by him. There is a quality to the clown that runs through everything he does, and it is worth pausing on, gently, for it explains a great deal about him, and that is his theatricality, his sense of himself always as a performer. He does not simply commit crimes, he stages them, arranges them like acts in a great show, full of spectacle and misdirection, and the grand reveal, always with an eye to the drama of it, the effect, the audience. He is an artist in his own terrible way, and his medium is chaos, and he cannot bear to do anything simply or quietly when it could be done with flair, with a flourish, with a joke. Even his cruelties are performances, elaborate and theatrical, designed above all to be witnessed, to shock, to horrify, to make an impression. And this points to something quietly sad at the very center of him, beneath all the noise and the color, for a performer needs an audience, and the clown, one comes to realize, is profoundly and terribly alone. He surrounds himself with henchmen, but he treats them as disposable, as props, discarding them without a thought when they have served their purpose. He cannot form a genuine friendship, cannot love in any healthy way, cannot connect with another living soul except through cruelty and manipulation, as we saw in the terrible way he took apart the young psychiatrist who tried to help him. He is, for all his performances, a being with no real audience, no true companion, no one who genuinely sees him, and there is a deep loneliness in that, the loneliness of a person who has reduced all of human connection to a joke that only he understands. Perhaps that is part of why he is so fixated on the detective, for the detective is the one person who truly pays attention to him, who takes him seriously, who is always there, watching, engaged, the one witness whose presence makes the whole performance mean something. In a strange and terrible way, the detective is the closest thing the clown has to a friend, the one constant relationship in his chaotic existence, the one who will always come, always respond, always be there to see the show. And there is something almost pitiable in that, in a being so broken that the only genuine connection left to him is with the man who hunts him. The only attention he can hold is that of his greatest enemy. The only love he can inspire, the terrible, obsessive love of a victim like the young psychiatrist, who he then destroys. For beneath the grin and the laughter and the theatrical flair, the clown is, when you look closely, one of the loneliest figures in all of fiction, a being cut off entirely from the ordinary human warmth that gives life its meaning, unable to give or receive genuine love, unable to form a single real bond, trapped forever inside his own chaos and his own performance, with no one to truly share it. His laughter, which sounds like joy, is really the opposite of joy, the sound of a person who has lost the capacity for real feeling and replaced it with a hollow and endless mockery, laughing not because anything is funny, but because laughter is all he has left, a mask over a void, a performance with no one really watching. And there is a strange and quiet compassion to be found in seeing him this way, not to excuse anything he has done, for his crimes are real and terrible, and his choices are his own, but simply to understand that the monster is also, in his way, a deeply broken and lonely thing, a person who lost everything perhaps, on some bad day long ago, and never found his way back, and has been performing his empty, terrible show for an absent audience ever since. It does not make him less frightening, but it makes him more human, more tragic, more comprehensible as a kind of warning about what a person can become when they are cut off entirely from love and connection and warmth. And there is a lesson in that, gentle and sad, about how much we all need the very things the clown has lost. It is worth drifting for a gentle while through the images and objects that make up the clown, for he is one of the most visually iconic figures ever created, and every part of his look carries meaning. There is the suit, of course, that famous garish ensemble, most often a vivid purple, sometimes with green and orange, colors chosen to be loud and clashing and wrong, the very opposite of the somber darkness of the detective, an outfit that announces him as a creature of gaudy chaos, a walking carnival, a jester in motley. It is the costume of a clown and the costume of a dandy at once, absurd and menacing together, and it is as recognizable, in its way, as any hero's cape. There are the objects he carries, the props of his terrible act, drawn from the harmless world of pranks and party tricks, and twisted into instruments of horror. There is the flower in his lapel that sprays acid instead of water, the joy buzzer in his palm that delivers a lethal shock instead of a harmless jolt, the deck of cards he leaves as his calling sign, that single joker card marking his crimes, a signature that says, always, that he was here, that this was his joke. Each of these takes something innocent and playful, something associated with childhood and laughter and fun, and corrupts it, turns it deadly, and that corruption of the harmless into the horrible is the very essence of his aesthetic, the whole idea of him distilled into a handful of objects. And there is the laugh, above all the laugh, for if the clown has a single signature, it is that sound, the wild, cackling, manic laughter that heralds his presence and punctuates his crimes. A laugh with no real joy in it. A laugh that is somehow the most frightening thing about him. It has been performed 100 different ways by 100 different performers, high and shrieking or low and rumbling. But it is always unmistakable, always the sound of chaos itself finding everything funny, always the last thing his victims hear. The laugh is his true voice, more than any words, the pure expression of what he is, and it echoes through the whole of his lore, through the comics and the films and the cartoons, the sound of the grinning dark. Even his name is part of the iconography, for he is called the Joker, and also, grandly, the Clown Prince of Crime, titles that capture the strange doubleness of him, at once a figure of comedy and a figure of menace, a joke and a nightmare, royalty and buffoon. The Joker in a deck of cards is the wild card, the one that belongs to no suit, that can be anything, that stands outside the ordinary rules of the game, and there could be no better name for him, for that is exactly what he is, the wild card in the ordered world of the stories, the one who does not follow the rules because he is not really playing the same game as everyone else. He is chance itself, chaos itself, the unpredictable element that can turn any situation upside down, and his name says so. All of it together, the purple suit and the Joker cards and the acid flower and the terrible laugh, adds up to one of the most complete and recognizable pieces of iconography in all of popular culture. A figure who can be identified instantly, anywhere in the world, from a single image, a single laugh, a single playing card left behind. He has become, like the very greatest characters, a piece of the shared visual language of humanity, his grin as recognizable as any symbol on earth. And there is something remarkable in that a villain, a monster, a figure of pure chaos, should have become so beloved and so universal, so woven into the imagination of the whole world. Though we tend to think of the clown as belonging entirely to the caped detective and to their single shadowed city, his chaos has, over the years, spilled far beyond those familiar streets, and he has crossed paths with the whole wider world of heroes, and proven himself a threat on a scale that goes far past one man and one town. For a figure so seemingly small, a mere clown with no powers at all, he has managed, in various stories, to threaten not just his city but the entire world, and even, in the wildest tales, the whole of reality. And there is something genuinely unsettling in the idea of so much chaos concentrated in a single grinning, powerless man. There have been stories in which the clown, through some accident or some stolen power, briefly gained abilities far beyond the human, and the results were nightmarish. For a being of pure chaos with the power to reshape the world is about as frightening a thing as can be imagined. In one such tale he gained, for a time, something close to the power of a god, and used it not for conquest or wealth, as another villain might, but simply to remake reality into an endless, horrible joke, a world twisted to his own mad logic. And it took the combined effort of the greatest heroes to undo it. These stories work precisely because we know what the clown is, know that he wants nothing sensible, nothing that can be bargained with, only chaos for its own sake, and so the thought of him with real power is uniquely terrifying. Even without any powers of his own, the clown has proven able to threaten beings who could crush him with a thought, for his weapon has never been strength but cunning, unpredictability, the willingness to do anything, to cross any line, that his more principled enemies cannot match. He has stood against the mightiest heroes in the world and made them afraid, not of what he can do to them, for he can do little, but of what he might do to the innocent, of the sheer scale of the suffering he is willing to cause. And there is a strange power in that, the power of a man with nothing to lose and no limits at all, against those who have everything to protect and lines they will not cross. And it is a testament to how large a figure he has become, that he can stand on that wider stage at all, that a villain who began as a one-off menace in a single detective comic could grow into a threat worthy of the whole assembled might of a universe of heroes. He has earned his place among the very greatest villains, not through power, which he lacks, but through the sheer force of his character, the depth of his chaos, the unforgettable horror and fascination of him, so that he is spoken of in the same breath as cosmic tyrants and world-devouring monsters, this grinning man with a flower and a deck of cards, and holds his own among them, and is, arguably, more frightening than any of them, precisely because he is so human, and so close, and so impossible to understand. But wherever he wanders, whatever cosmic stage he steps onto, he always returns, in the end, to the same shadowed city and the same caped enemy, for that is where he truly belongs, in the endless dance with the detective, and all his wider adventures are, in a sense, only detours from that central and eternal relationship. He is the detective's in the end, and the detective is his, and no matter how far the chaos spreads, it always comes home to those two figures circling each other in the dark, the order and the chaos, the eternal enemies who are, in some terrible way, the only true companions either of them will ever have. There is a question worth sitting with, gently, as the night deepens, and it is the strange question of why the world is so fascinated by him, why a figure so dark and so cruel should be so beloved, so endlessly reimagined, so often named among the greatest villains ever created. It is a genuinely curious thing, when you stop to consider it, that so many people should feel such affection for a character who is, within his stories, a monster, a murderer, a spreader of pure cruelty, and yet the fascination is undeniable, and it has only grown across the decades. There is something about him that draws us in, that we cannot look away from, and it is worth trying, gently, to understand what that something is. Part of it, surely, is the simple appeal of chaos to creatures who spend their whole lives inside rules. We all live bound by countless constraints, by laws and manners and expectations, and the endless small compromises of an ordinary life, and there is a part of us, buried deep, that longs sometimes to throw all of it off, to break the rules, to be free of all constraint, and the clown is that longing given form, a being who answers to nothing and no one, who does exactly as he pleases, who has escaped entirely from the cage of ordinary life. We would never actually want to be him, or to live in a world ruled by him, but there is a vicarious thrill in watching him, a safe and secret delight in his total freedom, and that is part of why we cannot look away. Part of it, too, is the fascination of the mystery, the endless unknowability of him, For a character we could fully understand would be a character we could exhaust, but the clown can never be exhausted, never be solved, never be pinned down, and so there is always more of him to wonder about. We keep returning to him the way we return to any deep mystery, drawn by the questions he refuses to answer, the past he will not reveal, the madness we cannot quite diagnose, and every new story offers a new possibility, a new facet, a new version, without ever giving us the final truth. He is a puzzle with no solution, and puzzles with no solution have a way of holding us forever. And part of it, perhaps the deepest part, is that he speaks to something we are all a little afraid of, the fragility of our own minds, the thinness of the line between sanity and madness, order and chaos, the fear that the clown himself is always insisting upon, that any of us might be one bad day away from coming apart. He is a walking embodiment of that fear, and there is a strange relief in facing it through him, in looking at the very worst that could happen, the total collapse of a self into chaos, from the safe distance of a story. We are drawn to him the way we are drawn to any safe encounter with our deepest fears, the way we are drawn to ghost stories and nightmares, because facing the frightening thing from a place of safety is its own strange comfort, a way of mastering, just a little, the fears we cannot escape. But there is a gentler reason, too, beneath all of that, and it is simply that he is a magnificent creation, a character of extraordinary depth and richness and endless possibility, and we are drawn to great art of any kind, even when its subject is dark. The clown is, whatever else he is, one of the finest villains ever imagined, a figure who has inspired brilliant stories and brilliant performances and endless thought and discussion, and part of our fascination is simply the fascination of encountering something made supremely well, a character so fully realized that he seems almost to have a life of his own. We love him not because we love cruelty, but because we love great storytelling, and he is one of the great achievements of an entire art form, and there is no shame and no darkness in being moved by something made that well. If you step back far enough from the clown, past the crimes and the costume and the modern horror, you begin to see that he is a very old figure indeed, older by far than the comic that first drew him, for he belongs to one of the most ancient traditions in all of human storytelling, the tradition of the trickster. Across the myths and folk tales of nearly every culture on earth, there is a figure like him, the fool, the jester, the trickster god, the one who upsets the order of things, who breaks the rules, who laughs at what everyone else takes seriously, who cannot be controlled or predicted or contained. These figures are as old as storytelling itself, and the clown is their modern descendant, the trickster reborn for our own age, and part of why he resonates so deeply is that he taps into something humanity has been telling stories about for thousands of years. The trickster, in all those old tales, serves a strange and necessary purpose. For a world of pure order, pure rules, pure seriousness, is a world that has forgotten something essential, and the trickster is the one who reminds it, who punctures the pompous and topples the mighty, and reveals the absurdity beneath the grand and serious surface of things. He is chaos, but chaos has its place in the great scheme, for without it, order becomes rigid and lifeless and cruel in its own way, and the trickster, for all his mischief, keeps the world honest, keeps it humble, keeps it from taking itself too seriously. The clown is a darker version of this ancient figure, his mischief curdled into genuine cruelty, but the deep pattern is the same, the eternal disruptor, the necessary shadow, the one who will not let the world rest easy in its own certainties. And this is why he and the detective fit together so perfectly, for they are the two ancient forces in their eternal opposition, order and chaos, and each needs the other in the great scheme of things. The detective is order, structure, rules, the will to hold the world together against the dark. The clown is chaos, disruption, the wild force that will not be contained. Neither can ever finally defeat the other, and neither should, for a world of pure order would be a prison, and a world of pure chaos would be a nightmare, and the two of them, locked in their endless struggle, hold each other in a kind of terrible balance, the balance that the world itself seems to require. Their war is not really a war to be won, but a tension to be maintained, the eternal dance of the two forces that between them make up everything. That is why the clown can never be finally defeated, and why, on some deep level, we would not really want him to be, for he is not merely a villain to be stopped, but one half of a necessary whole, the shadow that gives the light its meaning, the chaos that makes the order matter. Without the clown, the detective would have no great enemy, no true test, no dark mirror to define himself against. The light needs the shadow to be seen. The order needs the chaos to have something to hold against. And so the two of them are bound together not by accident, but by necessity, two halves of a single deep truth about the world, that it is made of order and chaos both, and always will be. There is a mirror in him too, and this is the last and perhaps the most unsettling piece of his meaning, for the clown is not only the detective's opposite, but his reflection, the dark possibility that shadows the hero, the road not taken. Both were shaped by trauma. Both stepped outside the ordinary world. Both became something more than human. And the difference between them, the clown always insists, is only a choice, a direction, the way each of them turned their pain. And there is a truth in that which is uncomfortable to face, that the line between the hero and the monster is thinner than we like to believe, that the same wound can make a protector or a destroyer depending on a choice, and that the clown is, in a sense, a warning, a picture of what even the best of us might become, given the wrong bad day and the wrong choice in its aftermath. But the mirror cuts both ways, and there is comfort in it as well as fear. For if the clown is the detective's dark reflection, then the detective is equally the clown's, the proof that the same trauma, the same darkness, the same bad day can be answered with goodness instead of cruelty, with protection instead of destruction, with love instead of chaos. The clown insists that everyone is one bad day from becoming him, but the detective stands as the living refutation, and between them they pose the deepest question there is and leave it, forever, for each of us to answer in our own lives, which force we will serve, which direction we will turn our own pain, whether we will add to the world's chaos or help to hold it together. It is a profound thing for a comic book villain to make us ask, and it is part of why the clown endures. It is worth pausing, near the end, to take in just how large a figure the clown has become, for he is, by almost any measure, the most famous villain in the entire world, recognized instantly nearly everywhere on Earth, more widely known than most real historical figures, a piece of the common imagination of the whole human race. From a single spared panel in a comic almost a century ago, he has grown into a genuine cultural titan, appearing in films that have earned billions and won the highest honors, in cartoons beloved by generations, in games and books and an ocean of images, his grinning face reproduced more times than anyone could ever count, his name a byword for chaos and madness the world over. There is something genuinely remarkable in that a villain, of all things, should achieve such fame, for we might expect the heroes to be the ones the world remembers and loves, and yet the clown stands beside the very greatest heroes in recognition and in fascination, and in some ways surpasses them. He has been called by many the greatest villain ever created in any medium, and there is a strong case for it, for few antagonists in all of fiction can match him for depth, for range, for sheer unforgettable presence, for the ability to be reinvented endlessly and remain always compelling. He has become the standard against which other villains are measured, the one they are all, in some sense, compared to, the dark king of the whole vast kingdom of imagined villainy. And his influence reaches far beyond his own stories, for countless later villains, in comics and films and games and books, carry some trace of him, some echo of his chaos, his theatricality, his philosophy, his grinning nihilism. He helped to invent a whole type of villain, the agent of chaos, who wants nothing sensible, who cannot be bargained with, who exists to disrupt and to horrify rather than to gain. And that type has spread throughout our storytelling, so that his shadow falls across a great deal of the fiction that came after him. He is not only a great character, but a foundational one who changed what a villain could be, and the whole landscape of imagined evil is different because he existed. That such a figure, so dark, so cruel, so genuinely monstrous, should also be so beloved and so culturally central is one of the strange truths about the human imagination, about our endless fascination with the shadow, our need to tell stories about the dark as well as the light. We do not love the clown because we approve of him, for we do not, but because he gives shape to something real, some fear, some fascination, some ancient understanding of chaos and its place in the world, and because he does it so brilliantly, so unforgettably, that he has earned his place among the immortal figures of our shared storytelling, the characters who will outlive us all and go on being told for as long as there are stories to tell. He will endure, that much is certain, for a creation this deep and this resonant does not fade, and long after the particular films and comics and performances of our own age are forgotten, the clown will still be there, still grinning, still laughing in the dark, reinvented once more for some future age that needs, as every age seems to need, its own version of the eternal trickster, its own dark mirror to the hero, its own safe encounter with the chaos we both fear and cannot look away from. He was very nearly killed in his very first appearance, spared by a single editorial decision, and from that spared life, he has become one of the most enduring figures the human imagination has ever produced, and he will, one suspects, outlast us all, still laughing, long into the future. There is a strange paradox at the center of the clown's endless war with the detective, one worth pausing on, for it reveals something deep about him. He appears, on the surface, to want to destroy the detective, to defeat him, to win, and yet if you watch closely across the decades, you begin to suspect that this is not really true at all, that the clown does not actually want to win, because winning would be the end of the game, and the game is the only thing he has. There have been moments in the stories when the clown could have killed the detective and did not, when victory was within his grasp and he let it slip, almost deliberately, because a world without the detective would be a world without his great opponent, his audience, his reason to perform, and that, to the clown, would be unbearable. For the clown needs the detective far more than he wants to defeat him, and some part of him knows it, and so his true goal is not victory but continuation, the endless perpetuation of the dance, the game that must never end. He wants the detective to keep chasing him, keep opposing him, keep giving his chaos meaning, forever, and to actually win, to actually destroy the detective, would be to lose the only thing that gives the clown's existence any shape at all. It is a strange and revealing paradox, an enemy whose deepest wish is not to defeat his opponent but to keep him, to hold him in the eternal game, and it deepens the terrible intimacy between them, the sense that the clown's obsession with the detective is closer to a twisted love than to any ordinary hatred. And there is something almost pitiable in it, once you see it, for it means the clown is trapped, as surely as any prisoner, trapped in his need for the one man who hunts him, unable to win and unwilling to lose, condemned to circle forever around the great fixed point of the detective, because without him there would be nothing, only the void and the silence and the meaninglessness the clown spends his whole life laughing at. His chaos, for all its apparent freedom, is really a kind of cage, and the detective is both his enemy and the only thing holding him to any kind of meaning at all. And there is a deep sadness in that, beneath all the laughter, the sadness of a being who has made an enemy into the entire center of his world because he has nothing and no one else. There is a question that sits quietly at the heart of the clown, one that his very name invites, and it is the question of what, exactly, he finds so funny. For he is forever laughing, forever telling jokes, forever treating the whole of existence as one great and endless comedy, and it is worth wondering, gently, what the joke actually is. For his humor is not the ordinary humor of shared delight, the warm laughter that draws people together, but something colder and stranger and more bottomless, a laughter that pushes people away, that horrifies rather than delights, that finds its comedy precisely in the things the rest of us find most terrible. The joke, for the clown, seems to be existence itself, the whole absurd and meaningless spectacle of it, and this is the dark philosophy beneath his endless mirth. He appears to believe that life is fundamentally a joke, a cruel and pointless one, that there is no meaning to any of it, no order, no purpose, nothing but chaos and suffering dressed up in the pretense of significance, and that the only sane response to so absurd a universe is to laugh. He has seen through the illusion, or believes he has, seen that the whole solemn edifice of human life and meaning is a kind of cosmic prank, and his laughter is the laughter of someone who is in on the joke that everyone else is too frightened or too foolish to see. It is a bleak and nihilistic vision, and a genuinely frightening one, for it is the exact opposite of everything that gives life warmth and meaning, and the clown embodies it completely, a being who has abandoned all hope of significance and replaced it with an endless, hollow laughter at the void. And this is why his humor is so unsettling, for it is not really humor at all in the way we understand it, not a celebration of life's joys but a mockery of its very meaning, the sound of someone who has given up on everything and finds the giving up hilarious. When the clown laughs, he is laughing at the idea that anything matters, at the idea that goodness is real, at the idea that our lives and our loves mean anything at all. And the detective, once again, is his great answer. For the detective's whole existence is a refutation of the clown's cosmic joke, an insistence that things do matter, that goodness is real, that our choices have meaning, that the universe is not merely an absurd and cruel prank, but a place where love and protection and sacrifice are worth something. The clown laughs at meaning, and the detective spends his whole life demonstrating meaning, building it, defending it, and their war is, at this deepest level, a war between laughter and love, between the conviction that nothing matters and the conviction that everything does. And it is worth remembering, as the night deepens, which of the two of them we believe, and which of them the stories, in the end, quietly side with. For all the clown's laughter has never once managed to prove that the detective's love is meaningless, and that failure is the truest answer to the clown's terrible joke. Over the long years, the clown's cruelty has touched not only the detective himself, but nearly everyone the detective loves, so that he has become a kind of shadow over the whole strange family the detective gathered around him, the single enemy who has hurt them all. He murdered the second of the bright young partners, and crippled the daughter of the good commissioner, and taken apart the young psychiatrist who tried to help him. And across the decades he has struck, again and again, at the people closest to the detective, always seeming to know exactly where to aim to cause the deepest pain. He is the family's great wound, the recurring grief, the one whose name they all speak with a particular dread, for each of them has lost something to him, or nearly did. And yet, when you look at the whole of it, there is something else there too, beneath the grief, and it is the endurance of the family against everything the clown has thrown at them. The second partner, murdered, returned to life, and found his own difficult way forward. The commissioner's daughter, terribly hurt, remade herself into something greater than she had been. The young psychiatrist, taken apart, clawed her way free and found her way back to herself. The commissioner, tormented, held on to his goodness. And the detective, wounded again and again through the ones he loves, has never broken, never crossed his line, never let the clown win the deeper battle for his soul. The clown has hurt them all, and not one of them has he truly broken, and there is a quiet triumph in that. A family that has endured the worst that chaos could do, and remained, in the end, itself. For that is the deeper truth of the clown's long war against the detective and everyone he loves, that for all his terrible power to wound, he has never had the power to corrupt, never managed to turn a single one of them into a version of himself, never proven his bleak thesis on any of them. He can take and hurt and grieve them, but he cannot make them cruel, cannot make them chaos, cannot make them his, and that failure, repeated across all the decades, is the clown's true and abiding defeat. Hidden beneath all his apparent victories, the family bends and grieves and loses and holds together anyway, and goes on loving one another anyway. And that stubborn, unbroken love is the one thing in all the world that the clown's chaos has never been able to touch. There is one more thing worth noticing about the clown, drifting here near the end, and it is the way each age seems to remake him in the image of its own particular fears. We saw how he changed across the decades, from the murderer of the beginning to the harmless prankster of the middle years to the horror of the modern age. And that changing is not random, for in each era, the clown becomes a mirror of what that era is most afraid of, a vessel for the anxieties of the moment. In gentler and more confident times, he could be a mere prankster, a bit of harmless fun. In darker and more uncertain times, he becomes a figure of genuine terror, of chaos and nihilism, and the fear that nothing holds any meaning at all. It is part of why he endures, this endless adaptability, for a character locked to a single meaning would grow stale and pass away, but the clown can be whatever the age needs him to be, can carry whatever fear the moment most needs to face, and so he is reborn again and again, always the same figure and always somehow new. Each generation of storytellers finds in him something that speaks to their own time, and each generation of audiences sees in him a reflection of their own particular unease, and so he goes on being relevant, being frightening, being fascinating, decade after decade, because he is not really a fixed thing at all, but a kind of mirror, showing each age its own shadow. And there is something almost reassuring in that, oddly, in the thought that the fears themselves are not new, that every age has had its darkness and its anxieties and has needed a figure like the clown to give them shape, and that every age has also had its detective, its answer, its stubborn insistence on the light. The particular fears change, but the deep pattern does not. the eternal dance of chaos and order, darkness and light, the trickster and the hero, and it has been playing out in our stories for as long as we have told stories, and it will go on playing out long after tonight. There is a comfort in that continuity, in knowing that the struggle is old, and that the light has been holding its own against the dark for a very, very long time, and holds it still. And so we come, gently, to the end of our long walk through the lore of the clown, and perhaps it is worth asking, softly, why we should want to spend a quiet night before sleep in the company of so dark a figure, and why it should soothe us rather than trouble us. Part of the answer is the one we found earlier, that there is a deep and ancient comfort in facing our fears from a place of safety, in visiting the darkness while wrapped warm in the light, in letting the mind brush up against the frightening and the strange while the body lies secure and still. The clown is one of the great embodiments of chaos and fear, and to wander through his story from the safety of your own warm bed is to master that fear a little, to hold it and examine it and then set it gently down, and there is something genuinely restful in that, in finding that the thing that frightens us cannot actually reach us here. And part of the answer is simply the distance of it all, the knowledge that every dark thing we have wandered through tonight is made of nothing but ink and imagination, that the grinning clown and his terrible laughter and all his cruelties exist only in the shared dreaming of people who made him up, and that when the story ends, the darkness ends with it, folded back into the page. There is no clown waiting in your dark, no laughter in your quiet, nothing hiding in the shadows of your room, but the ordinary, harmless dark of an ordinary, peaceful night. The chaos belongs to the story, and the story is over now, and you are here, safe and warm and held, with nothing at all to fear. There is a final comfort too, and it is the one we kept finding all through the clown's dark tale, hidden beneath every horror, and it is the light that answers him. For every time the clown insisted that the world was a joke and that everyone could be broken, there was the detective refusing to be broken, and the good commissioner who held on to himself through the worst of nights, and the young woman who remade herself after everything was taken from her, and the psychiatrist who found her way free at last. The clown spent his whole existence trying to prove that the darkness wins, and all through his story, again and again, the light quietly refused to let him be right. And there is no better thought to carry down into sleep than that, the quiet, stubborn triumph of the good, holding on, again and again, against everything the dark could throw at it. So let the clown fade now, gently, into the story where he belongs, and let his laughter grow faint and far away, and let it go quiet at last. Let the grin dissolve into the dark, and let the dark grow soft and warm and kind around you. No longer a place of fear, but a place of rest, the gentle dark of your own room on an ordinary night, holding you safe as you drift down towards sleep. There is nothing left to be afraid of, and nothing left to understand, and nothing at all left to do but let go and sink and rest. Let it all drift over you softly now. One last time, the grin in the dark and the chalk-white face, the playing card left behind, and the terrible laugh growing distant, the clown and the detective circling each other far away, all of it fading now, growing dim and gentle and soft, no longer pictures at all, but only a warm grey drift, dissolving into the quiet, into the warmth, into the slow, deep rhythm of your own easy breathing. Let them all go, every one of them, and let the dark be only the dark, and let the quiet be only the quiet, and let yourself be only here, warm and safe and sinking gently down. Feel the weight of the blankets over you, and the softness of the pillow beneath your head, and the quiet of the room around you, and let all of it hold you, gently, the way the light in the story always held the good and would not let them fall. There is nowhere you need to be, and nothing you need to do, and no one you need to be strong for. Only here, only now, only the slow and easy breathing and the warm and gentle dark. Let each breath grow a little slower and a little deeper, and let each one carry you a little further down, past the last of the day's thoughts, past the last of the images, down into the quiet, down into the warmth, down into sleep. Rest now. You have wandered a long way through the shadows tonight, and you have come out the other side into the warm and ordinary safety of your own quiet room, where there are no monsters and no madmen, only the soft dark and the sound of your own slow breathing and the gentle weight of sleep beginning, at last, to settle over you. There is nothing watching you and nothing to fear and nothing to do but let go. The story is over, and the light has kept its quiet promise, and the good and faithful dark will keep watch over you now until morning. Sleep well, and good night. There is nothing left to laugh at tonight, and nothing hiding in the dark, and no reason at all to be afraid. You have wandered a little way into the strange history of the laughing figure, into the moment of his birth and the editor's decision that spared him, and there is a great deal more still to drift gently through before the night is over. But there is no hurry now, and nothing you need to carry, and nothing at all that can follow you out of the story and into the warm, safe quiet where you are lying. Let it all drift over you softly now, the grin in the dark and the chalk-white face, the bright pages of the old comic, and the single panel that spared him, the clown and the detective circling each other through the years. Let the images grow dim and gentle and soft at their edges, the way the world does in the last moments before sleep, until they are no longer quite pictures at all, but only a warm grey drift, kind and formless and slow, dissolving into the quiet. None of it is real, and none of it can touch you. The clown is only a drawing. The city is only a story. The laughter is only ink on old paper. And you are here, now, safe and warm, and held gently by the ordinary, harmless dark of your own room. There is nothing watching you, and nothing to fear, and nothing to do but let your body grow heavy, and your thoughts grow soft, and the last of the day drains slowly away. Rest now. You have earned this quiet too. Let the laughter fade into the dark where it belongs, and let the dark be only the dark, soft and kind, and yours to sleep in. And there is nothing at all you need to do until morning, but lie still in the warmth and breathe, and drift, and rest. Sleep well, and let the gentle dark carry you softly down toward the light of morning. Good night.